Hi guys, welcome to my podcast, Emerging World Order 2025, where we dive deep into the geopolitical and geoeconomics changes that are going to shape our world today and in future, right? So today we are going to talk about the Arctic, the battle for the Arctic. And this Arctic region is actually becoming most hotly contested regions on the planet, with global warming making the Arctic more and more accessible. So, three global powers, Russia, United States, and China, they're positioning themselves for what could be the most significant races of our time, significant geopolitical races of our time. And it could also start a new type of Cold War. Not to mention, the Arctic race actually could be the key factor in making BRICS the most powerful global alliance. So stick with me till the end, and we are going to talk about battle for the Arctic. First of all, as usual, I will share my screen and we will get. So why I'm talking about Arctic today? See, as global warming increases, then Arctic ice is going to melt, right? And with Arctic ice melting, actually, there are lots and lots of things that are happening over there. And that's what we're going to talk about as to what makes Arctic so important that three major powers. In fact, pretty much at this point, lots and lots of Asian countries are involved into this thing. And this is podcast is gonna be very interesting. So stay till the end, okay? And please do provide your feedback in the end, like and subscribe. Let's get going. So, first of all, let's look at the Arctic region here. The Arctic Ocean right here. This circle, the inner circle that you see, the small circle, this is called Arctic Circle here. Okay. So, this whole region here you see is on the left side, you see United States, Canada, Greenland. Then on this side, you will see Sweden, Finland, Russia. And they form this whole entire thing, the Arctic Circle right here. So here, the Arctic Circle, and this is smaller circle, then bigger circle like this. So this whole thing is the Arctic Circle here. Okay. So I just wanted to show you on the map first. Now let's move forward. So why the Arctic actually matters? So here's the thing. The key points are the Arctic region has increasingly become a center for geopolitical attention due to its vast natural resources, strategic military importance, and opening sea routes due to climate change. So, so first of all, natural resources. So natural resources, when we talk about natural resources, so estimated 90 billion barrels of oil and 1,669 trillion cubic feet of natural gas are untapped in Arctic. And this is not me saying it. Okay, I'm not saying this thing. This is the United States Geopolitical Survey data. Okay, and then there are sea routes that have opened. That's one of them is Northern Sea Route that is controlled by Russia, and this can shorten the shipping between Europe and Asia by 20%. 20%, that's a lot of time. We're talking about something that would take 30 days. Now it's going to take only probably 20%. So you can do the calculation, 6 days or say 20 some days, right? So, so what is the so strategically military important? So see, Russia already has its military base here. Okay. And Russia has military capabilities here are at par with anybody right now. Okay. Russia literally controls this whole entire region. And I was watching one video on this thing about it was documentary actually, and Vladimir Putin actually mentioned about how this whole thing is going to contribute 2 to 3% of Russia's GDP per year. Think about that. So that's why Russians are heavily investing into it. And considering that Russia does not have much of agricultural land, even though, I mean, I would say not on the other side, right? The vast majority of Russia is just ice and natural resources, but not agricultural land. So Russians are going to tap into this thing more and more and more. And Arctic actually becomes a very good spot for space exploration and all too, because sky is very clear. And that's the closest point to anything, pretty much solar, moon, you name it. So so that's why Arctic becomes very important. Okay. Now, so the region is contested by 8 Arctic states, like I told you, right? Arctic Canada, 10 Denmark, that is Greenland. Let's go back here again and see Finland, Iceland, Norway, Russia, Sweden, and the United States. Which, if you go here, you see Sweden, Finland, Norway, then we had Denmark, then we have Iceland, Greenland, and you can see map UK here too a little bit, but it is out of the Arctic Circle. Okay, so that's why it's not counted. Canada, United States, right? And then we have Russia here. All right. So, and we talked about Northern Sea Route, and we talked about this data as well. That why the natural resources is going to open up a whole new shipping lane, and then its military presence. I mean, because see, technically, Russia and United States basically they're neighbors. Through, if you look at from the Alaska side of things. So, and here in the map also you can see, right, like this is whole entire Arctic, this is Alaska right here, the United States that you see Fairbanks and all, this is Alaska. Okay. And as far as US mainland is concerned, then we are working with Canada on this thing. There is a whole alliance that's working on it, but it's pretty slow process compared to Russians. Now let's move forward. Now another data for everyone, and this is the data as per US Geological Survey. So more than 70% of the mean undiscovered oil resources is estimated to occur in 5 provinces: Arctic Alaska, Brazia Basin, East Greenland Rift Basins, East Barents Basins, and West Greenland and East Canada. And this is from the outside of Russia things. Okay, this is from the US side of things, US and allies side of things. Okay. And more than 70% of the undiscovered natural gas is estimated to occur in 3 provinces: Western Siberian Basin, the East Barents Basins, and Arctic Alaska. So, if you go back and look at the map here again a little bit, so so right here, these are the areas right here. So for US and allies, right? And for Russia, it will be different. See, see the Barents land, Barents Sea right here, right? So now it is further estimated that approximately 84% of the undiscovered oil and gas occurs offshore. Offshore is Russia. So 84% of what's there is in Russia. The total mean undiscovered conventional oil and gas resources of the Arctic are estimated to be approximately 90 billion barrels of the oil. Think about it. 1,669 trillion cubic feet of natural gas and 44 billion barrels of natural gas liquids. Think about it. This is going to blow Middle East out of the water. Now, so this is the map that I grabbed from US Geological Survey. And this is a little bit hodgepodge map, and I didn't create it, so hey, not my fault. I blame US Geological Survey for this. But anyways, so you can see, right? Like if you look into it, then you see that assessment units is probability 100%. See, 100% probability, 50 to 100% probability, and let me show here, right? So and then little bit blue is 30 to 50% probability, then 10 to 30%, gray is 10%, and this area is low petroleum potential. So white areas are basically low petroleum potentials, but and now from this map you cannot understand this thing, but here's the thing. On the from on this thing, on this map, the left side of this is where you see lots of blue. That's the Russia side of things. And then where you on the right side of it, where you see a little bit less blue and all, that's the Canada, US, Greenland, and all that good stuff. Okay. So this is how much we are seeing right here, meaning that all this blue, 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 see that this all this is 100% oil we're talking about. And then again, the provinces is circum-Arctic resources appraisal. This is color coded for mean estimated undiscovered oil in oil fields. So green, once again, the same thing. Green is like undiscovered oil. This is undiscovered oil that you see right here. Dark green is undiscovered, and 1 to 10 is basically this is right here. Okay, and then red one is here is the undiscovered gas. The complete red that you see, dark red, is the undiscovered gas. And then as you lose the color, then how much is discovered basically it's going to talk about. Okay, 6 to 100, meaning between 6 and 100% is discovered, and only very little is it. All right, but this is, I just thought to share this data here because this is pretty interesting stuff. And the small this these things that you see, the codes, these are all province codes. Now, getting to the even more good stuff, strategic military importance of the Arctic. The Arctic is critical for Russia and the US as a frontier for missile defense and naval operations. And Russia's military buildup includes advanced radar system, missile defense system, and the deployment of nuclear-powered icebreakers. Russia has almost 40 of those icebreakers, larger than any country in the world. In fact, if you combine the US and the NATO, still they don't have that many icebreakers. And Russia has reopened over 50 Soviet era military bases and installed air defense systems across its Arctic region. Think about it. NATO's Arctic policy focuses on safeguarding key supply routes and ensuring freedom of navigation. So, see, here's the thing. Okay, here's the thing. Mainly at this point in the Arctic, Russia is the major player, and Russia has been the only player so far in the Arctic. But the rest of the countries, US and the NATO and all, they are starting to get the sense of it a little bit, and they are starting to build up little bit. It's not they're trying to ramp up, but it's just not there yet. Why? Because of many reasons. First thing first is that the economy. Then US is involved into too many wars right now, and the economy is already somewhere else. Then we have a leadership that does not focus on these things, something that is important. And for all these years, we had oil in Alaska, but nobody wants to drill over there. And so lots of reasons are there, but at least things are starting now. Um, and Russia has already secured its northern sea route, whereas US and NATO have not done much for their supply chain route over there in the Arctic. Now, what is Russia's Arctic strategy? Hmm? See, Russia's Arctic strategy is Russia is something like it holds almost 53% of the Arctic coastline. Let me show you the picture of it too. Russia holds almost 53% of the Arctic coastline. Then, uh, how else do I say it? See, let me see. Russia has rapidly expanded its military footprint in Arctic, reopening Soviet era bases. We talked about that. It has now 40 icebreakers, the largest fleet in the world, which are essential for navigating the icebreakers for the region. Yes, and I'll talk to you. I'll tell you about supply chain, how this whole thing becomes more and more important by the day. Okay, I'm just trying to adjust my screen real quick. It's been distracting me. Excuse me. Now, in economic investments, Moscow has heavily invested in Arctic oil and gas projects, and they partnered with their state-controlled Gazprom. Gazprom was the one that actually was controlling the Nord Stream pipeline and all that. That was blown up in 2022, right? And Rosneft. So the Northern Sea route, which Russia controls, is set to become a critical shipping lane, and I'll tell you why later on. But right now, I'm just giving you the introduction, just so that you know what exactly what we are getting into. All right, just this is all. This is just the overview right now. Okay. And Russia aims to make this route commercially viable as a Suez Canal, giving it control over one of the world's most strategic shipping corridors. This Suez Canal has already become obsolete. So why would Russian care about it when actually um, financially and economically and even militarily also it's a challenge. It has been a challenge to control and to maintain and the time wise also, like, see, supply chain is something that faster is cheaper. Okay, faster is cheaper and faster is smooth and faster is uh, efficient. That's how supply chain principle works. So 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 what's going to happen is that if you have a faster supply chain, then we're talking about the prices, the inflation that has been plaguing the whole entire globe. It's gonna go down over the period of time as soon as this whole thing starts, right? Because less time, you will have faster delivery. You have less resource consumption. The cost of supplying the items to you will be less. So hence, the whole entire market price will be less too. So, so that's why the shorter shipping lanes, they become more and more important. And this is why the world right now, pretty much every country that's out there and every group that's out there is working towards getting new supply chain routes. Okay. So, like, for example, see, uh, what last year in G20, IMEC was announced. IMEC, before IMEC, there was United Arab Middle East corridor that that's part of that was sponsored by G7, and that became IMEC later on. So now India controls the Indo-Pacific along with US. They are working in partnership to control the Indo-Pacific. And then there is your land route through IMEC and all that. Then there's INSTC. Then there is BRM. A whole bunch of uh, I would say supply chain routes are there. Why? Because after the pandemic hit, then world all of a sudden it woke up. Why? Because of the lack of supply chains to really provide items faster. Why? Because nobody wanted to go to China. Nobody wanted, and then after that, when the war started, every time there is a war, supply chain gets interrupted. Let's say a country like Russia, if Russia gets involved into a war, then uh, all the supply chain that goes from China to Europe, from China to somewhere else, it all gets halted and interrupted. And same thing with China. Let's say if China gets involved into some war somewhere, that's gonna also interrupt the supply chains. That's why world now wants multiple supply chains. They don't want to rely on one particular supply chain. They always want to have a backup plan. So hence the Arctic as well in the scene. But Arctic is unexpectedly, not even unexpected actually, Arctic is the most important. Now, so you see these red lines right here, the red line that you see, red line actually it defines the Russia's coastline, length of the coastline, that is 24,000 kilometers. This is how big the Russia's Arctic coastline is. Imagine that. Then Russia's fleet we are talking about, this is like 40 icebreakers. Canada, Denmark, US only has five icebreaker. Now Norway has give take two. And I would say Canada has much more than anybody else. So Canada has 18, right? Imagine that. And how many of those 18s really work, and how many and are operational, considering Canada's economy has taken down nosedive too, right? So this area is looking like NATO allies. This is looking like weak, not that strong. Russia has 40 strong, and Russia is building more icebreakers right now. So let's talk about the US in the Arctic. So America's late awakening. The US has historically lagged in Arctic engagement compared to Russia. Yes, that's true. Although Alaska gives us an Arctic presence. Um so Washington has been slow to recognize regions' growing importance. However, in recent years, this has changed with US stepping up its military and diplomatic activities in the Arctic. Now, see, why is this? See, why is this? Why there is late awakening? See, up until now, uh, our program in Arctic was mainly environment, climate studies, this type of thing, because of the Arctic Council. So we were just abiding by the Arctic Council laws and the rules that were created, so that nobody goes to the Arctic to create pollution and increase global warming further. But what Russians did is that Russians just went over there and they started to do what they had to do. And now, who is going to tell them not to do it, right? Because lots of it is for part of their territory, so they can do it. Now, so Russians basically started working on it, and while we were thinking about climate change, Russians started to uh, do what needs to be done. So now what was happening is that the US military has ramped up the Arctic cooperation, conducting joint exercises with NATO allies over there. And though it has two operational icebreakers compared to Russia's fleet, that's why I was saying that it was showing five icebreakers, but only two are operational. The Pentagon is increasing investment in Arctic capable military assets, including submarines and aircraft. When actually, in reality, this should have been done already. And instead of ignoring Alaska altogether, we should have built the capability over there from the get go. Especially when it's not even that Russia's data we are looking at. It's not Russia's geographical survey data we are looking at. We are looking at the United States geographical survey data, right? If your US survey data has already shown you that this is what is over there, then why do you expect that Russians are not going to do that thing? I mean, up until now, US logic always was that if we don't do it, somebody else will. So why not us? Why not we do it first, right? So you should apply this type of logic over there as well, and should have taken care of it, but they didn't do it. They're too busy with the Ukraine, dumping money to Ukraine. And resource and environmental concerns. Yes, the Alaska's oil fields have long been a key source of energy for the US. More ice melting, this growing interest in expanding exploration. And like I said, it always was Alaska. When Trump was president, then they started fracking and all that. But after that, due to environmental concerns and climate activists and all who show up, right? The $5 climate activists show up, and um, so it all stopped. Now let's see what happens now. But it needs to be handled. We're really behind in this thing. China's Arctic ambitions. China has just declared itself as near Arctic state. even though even though, let's, if you look at the map, right, we didn't see China anywhere, but China has declared itself as a near Arctic state. Then China doesn't have any Arctic territory. It has declared itself a near Arctic state and is determined to play significant role future. Beijing views the Arctic as a key element in its Belt and Road Initiative. And the reason why China did it, I'll tell you why. See, You saw that there was United Kingdom, right? It was a little bit out of circle, but it was there, right? So China knows that in case of a tense war-like situation over there again with Russia, UK may also declare itself as near Arctic state, which UK really is. So China is like, okay, hey, why don't we just declare ourselves into it and be partnered with Russia? This is going to solve the oil problem, and I'll tell you why China is more interested in this thing than anything else later on. Okay, so China is primarily focused on economic opportunities in Arctic, particularly in shipping and natural resources, which is pretty obvious. That's what region has to offer, so that's what people are go after, right? Then scientific and diplomatic. China also has been establishing presence through scientific research, icebreakers like Long, conducting expeditions in the Arctic. Diplomatic Beijing is positioning as a cooperative partner in the region. So this was all these was less like what everyone is doing up until now. What we talked about is that what everyone is doing over there, and who is showing more activity and who is showing uh, less activity in the region. Okay, so all this is here. Now let's keep moving forward. So China is actually saying that China declared itself a near Arctic state, and they started a new initiative, and they called it Polar Silk Road Initiative. They're going to link this thing to their BRI. It will become part of a BRI, and this thing is going to incorporate Arctic routes into their global infrastructure plans. And infrastructure projects and investments and partnership infrastructure projects in Arctic nations, emphasis on scientific. They say all these things, but we both know what happens, right? So let's go up and then we'll talk. We're getting there, okay? So we are getting where we are supposed to be, because now China's impact on Arctic geopolitics, strategic concern, US worry of increased competition, Russia cautious of dependency, and balance of power, influence over resource extraction, role in setting shipping regulations, dual purpose activities, scientific research with commercial and military. And, and normally, China's scientific research ships are basically the spy ships. We all know this thing. Now, and so the main thing is this: see, why China is getting involved into this. We will get to it. We'll get to it. Let's get into this. There are too many slides, so I'm just trying to do this thing as fast as possible. All right, so just bear with me. India and Japan join Arctic adventure. Now the kicker. Now here's the interesting thing that starts. Okay, India and Japan participated in the fifth Eastern Economic Forum in Vladivostok. Okay, India's Prime Minister Modi was the special guest of honor over there, highlighting a cooperative strategy between Russia and China. India's involvement in Polar Silk Road marks a significant moment for affairs. India joined BRI as part of Polar Silk Road. India has officially joined BRI. So anybody who says that India is not part of BRI, well, now you do know where India is involved in BRI. India has joined BRI, but India is very selective about it, where it is ready to operate. Okay. India even offered $1 billion of credit for Russia's far fast development, meaning that uh, into that Arctic region development, and complementing $7 billion already invested by Indian firms in Russian oil and gas. So 7 billion has already been invested, and India further offered $1 billion to Russia in this thing. India's involvement in Chinese Polar Silk Road marks a significant moment for international affairs. Why is that? Anybody who knows that India never joined BRI. India has always opposed BRI, and for many reasons, due to the border disputes, due to uh, Chinese policies, like they're shady Chinese policies that are basically like things like what you call this thing, the debt trap the Chinese do, the debt trap that they create a debt loop. So these type of things that Chinese were doing with the different countries. So India had a problem with that, those type of things. So that's why India never officially joined BRI. And then, not to mention, India already has its own ambitions too. So which India partner with G7, part of IMEC, and then India also has its own INSTC, which is in collaboration with India, Iran, North South corridor that goes all the way to Central Asia to Russia and connects to the Chabahar port, right? Now, so that's why it's very important, considering that for past 4 years, India-China relationships has been very tense, and now India has joined Polar Silk Road. And now you can see that's why China has been um, withdrawing from the border areas, and China wants to settle all the disputes with India too. And there is one more reason for this thing, which I will tell you later on. Okay? Now, countries like Malaysia, Mongolia, and Japan, even Japan is joining. Japan is America's ally, and Japan has joined this thing, Polar Silk Road Initiative. So, and this is why I'm saying that this is and Russia, China, and India are part of the BRICS, right? So, three major countries are gonna be in this whole thing, in this Arctic region, heavily involved. And imagine what that's gonna do to BRICS economy and um I would say the military presence on the globe. Just think about it. So now this is a little bit table that I had prepared for, and watch each country's involvement is strategic interest in the Arctic. Okay? Russia like has control of northern sea route. Russia controls that exploitation of natural gas and oil reserves, increased military presence. US countering Russian influence, energy security, Alaskan oil, freedom of navigation in Arctic waters, environmental protection, Canada's sovereignty over the Northwest Passage. That Canada's uh, uh, route, but Canada hasn't done much on it. But Canada and US are working towards it. Let's see what happens. But I'm pretty sure it will be developed sooner or later. But it's not that active right now. And then protection of indigenous rights, economic development, oil, gas, and mining, environmental conservation. Then exploitation of Barents Sea resources. And Norway's interest is exploitation of Barents Sea resources. NATO member concerned with Russian military buildup in the region over there, environmental protection and sustainable fishing. And since Norway is on the side of Russia on this side, if you look at the map, so that's why Norway's concern is the NATO Russian military buildup over there. Denmark, again, sovereignty and potential independence of Greenland, yes, because of Russian military and all other militaries that will be involved in this thing. U.S. military base at Thule, potential and untapped minerals and all gas. China's near near Arctic state seeking access to Arctic resources. That's Chinese interest and interest in Arctic shipping lanes to reduce trade times. Yes, joint exploration with Russia for oil and gas. Then European Union, usual blah blah. They have focus on climate change and blah blah stuff. So climate change and race for Arctic. The melting ice caps are opening new shipping lanes. I have said this thing before. And this is gonna be new Arctic gold rush. Why oil, natural gas, minerals, all kinds of things. And so competition for control over natural resources is intensifying. And China has initiated Polar Silk Road. In fact, pretty much every Asian country right now, major Asian countries are involved into Polar Silk Road. Imagine that, right? Normally, These countries are not part of BRI, but they joined Polar Silk Road to be part of this thing. Why? Because they are interested in the Arctic, the resources. Now, Arctic sea ice has decreased by 50% since the late 1970s, making the region navigable for the longer periods. Now, here's the thing, another interesting thing, the Arctic summer ice could disappear as early as 2035. So, next 11 years, by 2035, all that will be gone. China has invested 90 billion dollars in Arctic infrastructure, particularly in Greenland and Iceland. So let's see how all this pans out, because Greenland and Iceland, they are all part of something else. Chinese infrastructure is there. The question is that is BRICS going to come up with some sort of agreement to share the infrastructure? Let's say if Chinese infrastructure is somewhere on the globe, does it automatically become part of the BRICS, or will it be accessible by the BRICS countries or not? These are the kind of things that uh, will start to make BRICS more, I would say, more sensible organization or group than anything else. And if BRICS is just a platform for economic for BRICS pay, then I don't think that that's gonna last too long. But I'm pretty sure that BRICS countries are going to sooner or later realize this thing, realize this potential of sharing their infrastructure, certain infrastructure. I'm not saying that military bases or something, but certain infrastructures and certain things. And I think then BRICS will start to make more sense, I think. Now, this is another map, an area of Arctic sea ice in 2020 nearest record low. So this is all is left. You see the whole pink thing is all left, and this is northern sea out right here, and that's Russia, this is Canada and all that. But you see this thing, this is all is left. It used to be the whole entire circle used to be covered, and then slowly and slowly it's all gone. So, and this is the map where you see Northwest Passage. This is the Canadian Passage, and from here, your Chukuchi Sea, it starts from here, Arctic Ocean, then Northern Sea out. This is the Russian Northern Sea out. It goes towards Europe, Finland, and all that. Hmm? Now, now we come to the interesting stuff. See, when Russia-Ukraine war started, before that, uh, Russia has already been actually working on this thing for quite some time now. Okay, so Russia has been involved into Arctic development and Arctic military presence way before Ukrainian conflict. Okay, now now this is when I start this interesting stuff even more. Okay, so interesting thing is that before this, like I said, there was Arctic Council, right? Because of the Arctic Council, Western countries and Russia, they were working together to develop that area for cooperation for oil and natural gases, the climate change, all this good stuff. And they were working together to take care of it. But after the Russia Ukraine war started, and and there is sanctions on the Russia, what happened is that all the companies, all the Western companies, pretty much companies that were dealing that deal in oil, in dollar, those companies, they decided to leave the Russians uh, in the partnership, right? They left the whole entire development of that area, and they left all, they pulled out all the funding and investment from there, and Russians were left alone. So the idea was that uh, that with the sanctions and all, at least this is gonna stop Russians uh, building up their military over there. That was the idea, and this is why primarily right now the Ukraine war is being dragged over and over. Why? So that Russians cannot basically move as fast as they were going to move into the Arctic region. But the reality is that after Western sanctions, what happened is this. So India or China, they not only bought oil from Russia, they actually started to invest in Vladivostok. And this is why India had joined the Polar Silk Road initiative. After the Russia-Ukraine war, India agreed to be part of this thing so that uh, they can work together on exploring the region. And this is and all the funding that Russia had lost, the Western funding, the China and Russia and other Asian countries, like like I talked about Malaysia, then you have Japan and all these countries. They have invested in the even Middle East has invested in there, so they recovered all that money right away. And it was a very brief interruption, but they went back to normal now. And actually, Russia has increased its activity even more heavily over there. And so now the tables have turned. So the idea was that that US, I mean US and NATO, basically let's just say NATO will drag Russia into this thing longer, and then Russians won't invest anything into Arctic. But now what's happening is that things have turned, and Russia is dragging it, so the NATO and allies cannot invest anything into the Arctic region. So they are trapped with this whole Ukraine thing. And what's interesting is that Russia's aim never was in Ukraine, never was to capture the whole entire Ukraine. Russia just wanted to secure the Black Sea. That's about it. That the coastline, basically, they wanted to secure the Ukrainian coastline just to landlock Ukraine altogether. That's about it. That's the only thing Russians wanted to do all along. But now it's a different ball game, and it has become a lot easier because of sanctions and everything, and because of this war. Russians are doing it much more peacefully than anything else. And Russians have increased partnership with China on Arctic energy projects since sanctions began, including joint ventures on liquefied LNGs and all that. The Polar Silk Road is central to China's Belt and Road Initiative. And so, like I talked about, right, the whole Indian participation, Japanese participation, Middle Eastern participation, and all that. There's lots and lots of countries that are involved in this thing. Then linked to South China Sea dispute. Now, China has been since China has always uh, eyed on the Arctic. China always had this thing that okay, let's do that. And considering that China does not have that many uh, aircraft carrier, so what China did is that China made a very smart move. China started to build the islands in the South China Sea, something that NATO countries had problem with. And those islands, what those islands were doing is that those islands were basically unsinkable, and they were acting as an aircraft carrier, and even much better. And it was actually increasing China's naval area of influence. Okay. Now, but China was doing this thing because China had always eyed on the Arctic, and China had already discussed this whole Arctic region with the Russians long before anybody did. Okay? And this is why China planned this whole thing so that they can, this way, when they build all those islands, right? So the natural resources in the South China Sea and natural resources in the Arctic. So from all the way from Arctic to South China Sea, the entire natural resource line. And these are very vital for China's long term energy security. And not to mention, and the most important thing is the Polar Silk Road. Okay, Polar Silk Road is the only solution for China to bypass the Indian Ocean. The reason Chinese actually built China Pakistan economic corridor so that they can bypass Indian Ocean and directly go into the Gwadar port and do whatever they want to do. But the reality is that at this point, once the Arctic sea lane is open and starts to be fully functional, then China won't even have to worry about the Indian Ocean. China can directly use the Polar Silk Road corridor directly get go to, and actually it will be in way less time than it is right now. So, and this is another thing, guys. So once you de-dollarize, right? Once you start to do the manufacturing and you start to do the trade in your national currency, then supply chain becomes uh the the length of the supply chain, how and the how complicated the supply chain is, how and or how easy the supply chain is to navigate. This big supply chain becomes very essential for the business, because at that point you want to cut the cost to maximize the profit. So so that's why these different supply chains are being found and introduced, and everyone is trying to grab them ASAP, especially the manufacturers, producers. So the future will belong to the countries that will produce something countries that have more and more commodity. Russians will have more commodity. Now they are in partner with China and India, so they will have more commodity. Now think about this. Now I said that this is gonna make BRICS the most important and very powerful. Why is that? Why? Because India is going to control the entire Indo-Pacific. Okay, Indo-Pacific will be controlled by India. Why? Because China will enjoy South China Sea and Arctic Polar Silk Road. China is not going to come to Indian Ocean. Basically, India won't have anybody to challenge. They will be enjoying Indo-Pacific from Australia all the way to the Middle East, and then you will have China and Russia on the other side, meaning that the two sides of the globe basically will be controlled by BRICS countries. And I believe that over the period of time, lots and lots of countries, even countries that are in South China Sea, they are also going to join BRICS. BRICS may probably change certain policies, and they may start to come up with some sort of agreement to share the supply chain routes and all that, and without any issues, without any taxes or tariffs or anything else. They're going to open these lanes for the BRICS countries that want to work together. And because of this whole polar silk route or polar silk road, China has increased its military spending. Now, since China wants to focus on the Arctic, so China is trying to slowly withdraw its forces from the conflicting areas, disputed areas from China border. That's why China has been withdrawing. And they have agreed that, hey, let's withdraw and let's do all that thing. They're not telling the intention. The true intention is to go and focus on the Arctic and work with India on the semiconductors and all that. That's the main reason. And over 30% of the global maritime trade passes through the South China Sea, while Arctic represents an emerging see that. So you want to control Arctic and you want to control South China Sea at the same time. Now imagine that, right? Arctic, South China Sea, Indo-Pacific. You're controlling each and every supply chain lane, shipping lane that's out there. Now let's look at this. So this is the actual. This is a very good map, right? So right here, see, uh this is the route, right? So what happens is that uh, so China can start from here, go to South China Sea, and then from the Arctic, then they can take there's a shipping route here, and then they go to Paris directly right here. This takes actually less time compared to going from here, then Strait of Malacca in the Indian Ocean, all the way from Indian Ocean through Suez Canal and all that, then go to Paris. That takes longer actually, right? So this is gonna be a very good option for China versus through the Indian Ocean. So China actually won't even worry about this. So as a result, what's gonna happen? So chances are, unless China is really concerned about the military aspect of CPEC, the China-Pakistan Economic Corridor, I think that China will even dump this whole CPEC thing too. Why? Because it doesn't add any value. Other than add any value, instead, actually, it puts China and India uh, into into a region of dispute or some sort of contention all the time. That hey, and it actually hurts their relation more than anything else, because if you remove those whatever claims that China makes, territorial claims, like if you look at Arunachal claim or Aksai Chin claim and all that, China will never get those. China already realizes this. The China will never get those from India. Good luck. But what China is, so China's thought process is that I'm not making anything out of it, and we can make all these claims and create rift with India. So instead of doing that, why not just forget about the claim and work with India to make money and work on improvement of our economies and all that? That is actually a lot better strategy than unnecessarily creating rifts with India over all the nonsensical things that are not actually, even let's say, if you give Arunachal or Aksai Chin to China, just hypothetically, China is not going to make money from Arunachal and Aksai Chin, even when they were part of China. Technically, if you look at it, China is never going to make that kind of money from those regions. They may think that they will, but it's not going to happen. So I think after all the calculation and deliberations, I think they realized that it's best to have a good relationship with India, considering that they're not going to take, they don't have to worry about Indian Ocean, and especially India is like actually helping China in creating uh, uh, this route. So now, the role of NATO in Arctic conflicts. NATO has increased military exercises in Arctic. They are doing military exercises. They don't have any like permanent bases or anything. Few things are there, but not that much active. The alliance's recent Arctic defense strategies focus on protecting the transatlantic link and ensuring energy security. See, the problem with NATO is this. The biggest problem with NATO is that NATO means US. Rest of the NATO countries literally are too passive to do anything, to be honest. Okay. And so this is why, see, NATO has held over 20 major Arctic military exercises in last decade, including participation from non-Arctic members like UK, France, and Germany. See, that I say UK, France, and Germany. So UK is already there, and the US spends 7 billion annually on Arctic military infrastructure, signaling its long-term commitment. That's the whole thing. That if US does it, then that's fine. Otherwise, NATO as such, Europe is not very much keen on it. The economy is already too busted to do anything. So what lies ahead? So clearly, so as soon as this whole Ukraine or say Israel Hamas stops, which it will, then we will see the actual activity in the Arctic. And we are going to see all kinds of alliances being made for the Arctic, and environmental concerns, and lots of new narratives will pop up. Okay. And So projections for future Arctic shipping growth and its economic impact. See, Arctic is not just the shipping growth. Actually, it will be good for the flight. Planes can fly through Arctic as well, and that's gonna actually lower the flight time as well from one part of the globe to another. And climate models showing the rate of ice melt and navigability of Arctic routes. So that was normal. But let's look at the Arctics one more time, real quick. See, the Northern Sea Route and Northwest Passage, right? So if we go here, so so China starts from here and Northwest Sea Route right here, and from here, right? See, Northwest Sea Route, it starts from this point here in the Bering Strait right here from the black dot, and then it goes all the way in the circle, and then from here to Paris right here. So for China, China will so simply not even worry about Indian Ocean after that, considering China is trying to decouple from the US. So in its decoupling strategy, actually, this is a lot better route for China. So if you see uh, China dumping CPEC altogether, don't be surprised. And if you see China dumping all the support for Pakistan, also don't be surprised. But it will all depend on how things are going to happen over the period of time. But at least that's my thinking that it's going to happen by 2035. You will, I mean, next 5 years, I think you're going to see lots and lots of drastic changes. And everything will, the whole global supply chain is going to start to shift towards. We will start to hear lots and lots of things about Alaska, Arctic, climate change. We were already hearing about climate change, but all this is gonna happen too. So, guys, I think that's all I have for this thing, and I will bring more updates on this thing as time goes by. This was just the introduction. I haven't even talked about the geography and individual capabilities of countries that are involved in it. Right now, this was like the overall, right? This is the overall picture that I gave you as to what's actually brewing over there in as far as geopolitics is concerned. But um and also I had to keep it a little bit faster because I didn't want to drag it for hour and a half like that, right? That's all I have, guys. And if you like it, please subscribe and give your feedback. Just please drop your feedback. I try to improve as much as I can, but then I have to look for time constraints and lots of other things are involved too, right? All this requires research, thorough reading information. It takes time. So, anyways, so thank you, like and subscribe, and I'll see you in another video.